Hello and welcome to Module 1 of the International Marketing Diploma. Here we are going to introduce the international marketing environment. Our aim is to introduce the marketing concept, the global marketing concept, and to discuss major changes in the world that will lead to more opportunities. Our objectives are to study the macro overview of the international marketing environment, and then to look at the internationalization process, and we'll end the session by observing a sample brief about a global opportunity. The world is changing rapidly. The geo-economical landscape will look very different in 2020. This will have a profound impact on where the new market opportunities will be. Some notable predictions include that China may become the biggest single economy in the world, with the US remaining prominent at the second position, and countries like India, Russia and Brazil experiencing unprecedented growth. As a result of the shift in growth patterns, it's expected that the APAC region, the Asia Pacific region, will become the largest consumer market in the world, and it'll be followed by Europe in second place and North America in third place. And since 2008 already, we've heard a lot about the balance transfer, or the transfer of the balance of power to Asia, and more recently President Obama in the US has been talking about their pivot to Asia as well. And this just reinforces what's been happening in the world and where the trends are heading. Now, in recent years, many new cities that never even existed has been built in China. The country now has more than 100 new Tier 2 cities which will have more than 1 million people each. Now, in support of the rising might of the APAC region, it is predicted that amongst the G20 and OECD countries, India and China will account for 40% of all young people with a university degree. It's also important to understand that the aging demographic in the EU, USA and China will create an urge for greater and for more unfettered access to new markets through globalization. And the competition between these three regions has already caused some global tension. However, the opportunity that there is should not be underestimated. In recent years, global trade has been improved through economic integration. Examples of how this integration has been achieved include what we call FTZs, foreign trade zones, such as Dubai and Hong Kong. There are cross-national agreements such as NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the Mercosur bloc in Latin America. And it also includes common markets like the EU or the USA. And there are also now monetary unions, and in a monetary union a single currency will be used, again such as the EU or the USA. As marketers, when we require a macro overview of any country or region, one of the most effective ways to achieve this is by carrying out what we call a pestle analysis. This course will include a report that demonstrates the use of a pestle analysis for your information, but for now all we need to know is that pestle stands for political intentions and policy making, economic structure, indicators and policy making, societal, technological developments, ecological and natural environmental influences, and L, which stands for legal frameworks and the imposition of new laws. The sources of information that we use in a pestle analysis should be accurate and reliable. Good sources will often include industry reports or governmental sources. Next, we'll define the internationalization process, which is a methodical approach that any company should use or follow if it aims to expand internationally. Firstly, we can see that a decision must be made as to whether or not we're going to enter a new country. Once we made that decision, then secondly, we need to select the countries that are viable to enter. And thirdly, once we selected those countries, we need to know which entry strategy is going to be the safest and the best to use. Once we know that, then it enables us to move to the fourth phase, which is to form a marketing plan. And then our final step will be the execution of the marketing plan. And of course, we're going to dynamically review the plan. Now, companies that expand internationally would usually do so through two approaches. They can either do so through localization or globalization. When Nestle created local versions of the Kit Kat chocolate bar, it chose to localize its product. But when Apple, on the other hand, chose to provide one standard version of the iPad, it followed the globalization model instead. Now, a good marketer will of course try to be what we call glocal, which is to be global and local. The global vision of the company can be structured in four ways. The company can be ethnocentric, which is where the home country is considered superior and centralized. Or the company can be polycentric, which is where the company's vision is for each country to have unique adaptation to the local markets. Company vision can also be regiocentric, where the company coordinates closely with various regions, or the company can be geocentric, which is what we call local, to think global and to act locally. We'd like to conclude this session with a brief. Now, let's imagine that you're an international marketing consultant and the Italian owner of a luxury manufacturer, similar to Prada, consults your advice on entering the Chinese market. And his questions to you are as follows. Number 1, does a suitable opportunity exist in China? Number 2, if it exists, how can they best enter that market? And then thirdly, how should the marketing plan be adapted for China? We hope that by the end of this diploma course, you will be competent and confident to answer similar questions to the above questions in order to help you exploit global opportunities. When you're ready, please continue to the next lecture. Hello and welcome back to Module 2, where we will study market opportunity selection. Now, what we're going to do is to explore new market opportunity selection by using a practical case study. In other words, how do we enter these new markets if we found that they are attractive? Our objectives will be firstly to look at a market opportunity question, which will come in the form of a brief. Then we will explore some reporting and analysis elements of a specific case study. And then finally, we will discuss the preparations we need to be making to enter a new market. Now, before we continue, I would recommend either before or this session, if you could read through the luxury market report which we have attached. This is a report pertaining to China. So it's attached to the Udemy module, and it will help you to gain full insight. Now, let's look at a research question, and this is fictitious. As a marketing consultant, you receive a brief from the Italian luxury owner of a luxury brand. They're based in Italy. They are very similar to Prada. I assume you know about the Prada brand, or you could perhaps compare this to Gucci. Now, they consult your advice on entering the Chinese market, and they're specifically asking you two questions right now. They want to know, firstly, they want to know, does a suitable opportunity exist in China? And secondly, they would like to know, if an opportunity exists, how can they best enter the market? So now we're going to share some extracts from the luxury market report for China to see how to best answer the brief. Now, the report found very early on in our research that the Chinese market is quite different to perhaps other markets. Thought leaders argue that whilst the market research is reliable in mature markets such as the US or perhaps the UK or Europe, statistics about Chinese consumers are neither complete nor accurate. And in fact, this was to some extent confirmed where Glenn Murphy from AC Nielsen stated that there is no case for successful data collection and data usage in China. Now, this is an international opportunity. We're not going to fall at the first hurdle, but we're of course going to continue to explore this option. We see that, on the other hand, first mover disadvantage can be exploited by late entrants who learn significantly from earlier entrants. In other words, if there's already other brands in China, we can learn from their mistakes. If we cannot find primary data in China, then what we can still do is access secondary data from US or European companies operating in the country. And as you're going to see later on, there are several. Of course, research companies such as AC Nielsen have other wonderful ways of helping us if we're prepared to buy the information that we would need. Now, moving on with our report, looking at what else we've discovered, we learn that one report suggests that by 2015, which is now already, China will account for 20% or indeed $27 billion worth of the global luxury sales in total. It also suggests, the same report, that significant growth is projected for both the upper middle class and the very wealthy. This information is indicative of an opportunity, and this is potentially good news for our client in Italy. Now, it is also useful to consider recent data so that we can understand what has already been happening in that market. In this particular case, we found that China maintained a phenomenal growth and scale advantage over other markets, which is indeed a strong indicator. Next, we're going to consider some historic data in order to continue exploiting our first mover disadvantage. By tracking the early movers, we're looking here at data pertaining to Omega, Burberry and Gucci. We learn that these stores respectively owned 106, 62 and 58 stores respectively throughout China. Perhaps to our surprise, it transpires that their Chinese stores have been 10 to 15% more profitable than their European stores. This is interesting because, notwithstanding the fact that taxes are so high in China, they've nevertheless been able to be more profitable than they are in Europe. Research also tells us that Hermes experiences its largest margin in that region. We just established another strong indicator. We've established that there is a sign of low competition and strong demand in China. At this point in time, with so many strong indicators present, it's really worth carrying out more research. So what we do is we continue the research, and we've now also established that the Chinese market surpassed that of Japan and is now the second highest count. It has the second highest count of independent luxury retail outlets in the world. In other words, the only leader ahead of China right now would be the USA. Another great method of conducting this research is to compare or to conduct a like-for-like comparison with other segments or other industries in the same host country. In other words, we'll go to China and we'll say, in this particular case, we said we're going to compare the luxury car market with the luxury fashion brand market. And in particularly, we're going to count the amount of outlets there are for cars, in other words, luxury car dealerships, and we're going to compare that to the amount of mono-brand luxury fashion stores. Very interesting, we found that there is 150 outlets for luxury motor cars, but only 37 outlets for mono-brand luxury stores. Now this is very interesting because in addition to the other research findings that we have, we've certainly now concluded that there is a very suitable opportunity in China, and we may indeed now proceed to the next step, which should be to look at the selection of an entry strategy. Now, when we are preparing to manage new markets, there are several other factors to take into account. This report is by no means exhaustive of what we need to do. We have a decision to be made in regards to product policy. We've got pricing, we've got distribution, we've got advertising, we've got sales promotion, and we've got the sales force to consider, all of which will be discussed in a later module. I hope that you enjoyed this module. I would like you to pause and reflect on this, perhaps have another look at the report we've prepared for the luxury market in China, and see what you think about it. Welcome back to Module 4, where we will study the bottom of the pyramid. Earlier in this course, you may have seen reports of luxury markets. However, you should not jump to the conclusion that those are the more profitable markets and that we should be focusing on them. In fact, the poorer markets, by contrast, represents a massive opportunity in the world. There is unfortunately a growing gap between rich and poor, and in memory of Professor C.K. Prahalat, who passed away in 2010, we would like to refer to this segment as the bottom of the pyramid. The aims of this module is to explore the largest market in the world, and we will learn that it is possible to improve the lives of people at the bottom of the pyramid whilst also adding profit to the company. Our objectives are to briefly look at case examples in Brazil and India, and then to explore what Professor Prahalat taught the world, and to look at opportunities at the bottom of the pyramid, and finally to discuss long-tail theory. I hope you will enjoy this session and look forward to answering your questions in the forum. Did you know that George Paulo Lehman, who is the gentleman on your right, who owns Anheuser-Busch, is the richest man in Brazil? He did not do so. He did not become the richest man in Brazil by selling upmarket wines to the wealthy sector. But instead, he did this by selling the cheapest beer to those at the bottom of the pyramid. If you look at the gentleman on your left, Dilip Shanghvi, he's the founder of Sun Pharmaceuticals in India, and he's India's second wealthiest man. He did not achieve this status by selling expensive drugs to the wealthy, but he did this by producing or mass producing products so that it becomes affordable to those at the bottom of the pyramid. Now let's have a look at some valuable lessons from Professor C.K. Prahalat. He produced some valuable insights in 2004 already, when he predicted growth at the bottom of the pyramid. The fundamentals of this segment is as follows. The poor, those at the bottom of the pyramid, are brand conscious. So if a brand acknowledges this by making adaptations to provide a range that caters for the poor, it will experience a huge surge in volume. Microfinance and venture capital, if we're willing in these sectors to take a risk on the bottom of the pyramid, we can experience very high yields. And there is the example of Nokia as well, Nokia in India. They recognize that there's a very poor segment in India, and by providing specific solutions to the problems of farmers, who are the poorest of the poor sometimes, it has managed to outperform every other phone provider in India, because there was strong endorsement by those at the bottom of the pyramid. More than anything, Nokia and Professor C.K. Prahalat demonstrated that companies can do a lot to improve the lives of people at the bottom of the pyramid, whilst adding a profitable segment to their business portfolio. If this appeals to your sense of philanthropy, maybe you want to consider further studies into this very sustainable development at the bottom of the pyramid. Now we'll briefly explore opportunities at the bottom of the pyramid. Mukesh Ambani, India's richest man, stated that Africa is the final frontier. He's moved into Africa with mobile phone communications. The sheer volume of the population in Africa and the fact that many people there will only ever access the internet by mobile phone demonstrates the size of the opportunity that there is for the mobile market in Africa. Mr. Carlos Slim, he was the richest man in the world at one stage. He already achieved this in Mexico and in Latin America, what Mr. Ambani hopes to achieve in Africa. This new democratization of the developing world through technological enablement, through low-cost mobile solutions, will definitely open the door to many other opportunities. These opportunities will include mobile payment solution, also known as M-Pay, which is aimed at helping the poor. It can bring incredible value to poor regions. And we've also got an opportunity in education solutions for mobile phones and various other intangible services that internet entrepreneurs can provide. Another opportunity is microfinance, and the industry of microfinance developed a problematic reputation. However, there's an opportunity now to bring value to poor markets through more ethical forms of microfinance. These markets include practically all of Africa, India, and parts of Latin America and Asia. If you're a smaller trader or marketing firm and you're looking for new market opportunities, we would recommend Alibaba.com. It's a great starting point. It's easy to gauge the supply and demand through these research tools. Of course, there's Amazon as well. Now, you might look at the information that we're presenting on the screen right now and ask the question, is the bottom of the pyramid perhaps inverting? Well, as millions of people are changing class, moving up the pyramid, there are also other markets that benefit from this. One such example is the UK education system. It now receives more students from China and India than it receives from the entire European Union. This brings us to a very interesting philosophy that an international marketer should always remember. If we look at the other segments, which is circled, if you look at the bottom left on your screen, we see that it represents a larger number in total than all the countries above together. So the other segment, circled in red, would represent a total volume that increases whatever the other markets combined is providing the UK. So all the small countries who by themselves are not significant, if we look at them combined, it offers a very substantial combined volume. And this leads us to long-tail theory. Now let's have a look at how long-tail theory in the UK education market enables them to be very, very successful. Long-tail theory tells us that the combined number of small segments can exceed the total volume provided by the largest segments. So in the case of the UK's education market, the amount of smaller countries provide more students than the three largest segments together. So in other words, China, US and India together is exceeded by the countries such as Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, Malaysia, Brazil, Israel, Vietnam, South Africa and Colombia. Now, there are more examples of how long-tail theory benefited marketers around the world. If you can apply long-tail theory when you research Amazon.com or Alibaba.com, you'll be amazed at the amount of smaller opportunities that you'll find which other people may have overlooked.